In 2010, a bioengineering company called InGen, the people who saw Jurassic Park and thought, let's do that, but dumber, is busy making dinosaur hybrids on an island. Inside one of their labs, a scientist drops a candy wrapper, and somehow that single wrapper gets sucked into an airlock, causes a system failure, and shuts down the door controls. Everyone panics, running like the floor just turned into lava. One brave, or stupid, scientist runs back to close the door before anything inside gets out. Another guy is trapped inside, pounding on the glass, begging for help, but his coworker just stares at him like, yeah, no. Then, the guy's begging stops because a dinosaur grabs him from behind and turns him into a chew toy. Fast forward to 2027. Dinosaurs have been around for 32 years, but it's not the fun dino utopia you'd think. Climate change, diseases, and just plain bad luck have killed most of them off. Humanity's over the hype. Dinosaurs are yesterday's iPhone model. The few that remain hide near the equator, the only place left that feels like home. The government's locked the place down. Humans aren't allowed anywhere near it. In New York, Martin is stuck in traffic. Not because of bad drivers, because there's a literal apatosaurus blocking the street. While he's sitting there, a mercenary named Zora slips into his car. She's here to pitch, or rather be pitched, a mission. Martin's bosses at a pharmaceutical company need dinosaur blood to develop a cure for heart disease. To get it, Zora would have to sneak into the forbidden zone. She says no at first, but changes her mind when Martin offers enough money to buy her own island. They rope in Dr. Henry, who's currently shutting down a dino museum because nobody's visiting anymore. Turns out, Henry's the genius who told the company to use dino DNA for medicine. He doesn't want to go on this little blood heist until Martin dangles the chance to meet actual dinosaurs. Henry insists they need to target the biggest creatures because they've got the biggest coronary muscles. His top picks? Titanosaurus from the land, Mosasaurus from the sea, and the Quetzalcoatlus from the sky. Oh, and the catch? They have to take the blood while the dinos are still alive. The next day, the trio heads to Suriname and meets Duncan, Zora's old friend and boat owner. He was in when they talked over the phone, but now he's out because he values living. Martin offers him more money, and suddenly Duncan's very brave again. They head out, avoiding government patrols, and Henry shows off his special darts. Only one per dinosaur, designed to pierce thick skin if fired from at least 10 feet away. Take a sample, eject, and float down with a parachute. Easy, right? Meanwhile, Ruben is taking his daughters, Isabella and Teresa's boyfriend Xavier on a sailing trip. Out on the water, they spot fins. First thought, dolphins. Reality, giant prehistoric sea monster. The Mosasaurus slams their boat once, then again, hard enough to flip it. Everyone jumps overboard except Xavier, who's trapped inside. He finally busts out, but now he's swimming for his life with the Mosasaurus closing in. Luckily, the beast dives under the boat and disappears. For now. The next morning, Zora's crew wakes up to a mayday call from the stranded family. Martin and Bobby, the security guy whose job is literally to protect people, vote to ignore it. Zora, being the only human with a conscience, insists they help. Duncan backs her up, and the boat changes course. Minutes later, Ruben spots them and fires a flare. Family rescued. Everyone's smiles are fake. Zora wonders why a Mosasaurus would bother attacking random boats. Henry's theory? The dino saw the boat as competition. The family asks why they're hunting it, but no one answers. Because secrets. Then the radar pings. Alarm blares. Cue Mosasaurus, round 2. It launches out of the water like an Olympic diver with murder issues. Zora gets strapped to the deck, dart ready. Duncan floors it, boat screaming across the waves. Zora aims, Mosasaurus jumps again. Dart misses, plunks into the water. Great start. The beast comes in for a hit, forcing Duncan into evasive maneuvers. Henry hands her a second dart, but the Mosasaurus slams the boat and knocks Zora off balance. She clings on with her legs, solid core strength. Henry hauls her up, and finally, thunk, dart in the hide. Blood sample secured, vial ejected with its cute little parachute. Henry catches it like a pro. While everyone's still high-fiving, the Mosasaurus comes back with backup. Spinosauruses. Apparently we're in the Strange Friendships episode of Planet Earth. Bobby runs out and starts shooting like Rambo with bad aim. Duncan warns him to stop. He doesn't. A Spino solves the problem by jumping out of the water and yoink him into the water. Problem solved. The Mosasaurus does another huge jump, lands with enough force to rattle the boat, and now Nina, the co-pilot, is dangling over the edge. Meanwhile, Isabella nearly slips through the railing until Ruben yanks her back, hurting his leg but saving her. Mr. Spinosaur bites the railing instead of her head. Nina scrambles to safety. Duncan steers towards shallow waters. Zora, convinced they're about to crash, readies life jackets. Henry secures the sample. Teresa tries to radio for help. Martin stops her, because apparently being attacked by sea dinosaurs is need to know. She pushes him away, slips and dangles over the edge. Martin Does nothing. She falls. Xavier dives in with a rescue can. Reuben, thinking the boat is doomed, tosses Isabella a life jacket and jumps with her. The Mosasaurus slams the boat into a rock, dragging it like it's angry at real estate. Henry and Zora duck to avoid being crushed. The engine explodes, and Clerk, one of Duncan's crew, goes flying. Duncan somehow keeps the boat alive until it hits the shallows. Everyone bails. Nina tries to grab a bag but gets ambushed by a Spinosaurus and dragged off as a snack. Martin warns the team that the island's full of genetically scrambled dinosaurs thanks to old InGen experiments. Zora cuts through a jungle fence, lays down the rules. They've got 24 hours before the rescue chopper makes a 2-minute flyby at sunset. Then it's swamp time. Something brushes Zora's leg. It's a giant eel. It jumps, startles everyone, but swims off. Martin stops for a drink, gets dripped on by blood, looks up to see a helicopter crash wedged in a tree. Pilot's holding a gun. Martin yoinks it without telling anyone. Meanwhile, Xavier finds Teresa. Reuben and Isabella find them too. They swim into a cavern, emerge on the island, spot old InGen pipes, and decide to follow them. Isabella meets a baby aqualops, herbivore adorable, names it Dolores. Xavier's plant trimming wakes a nearby dinosaur, so they bail. Night falls, they camp. Xavier heads out to pee and doesn't notice 2 velociraptors sneaking up until they're ambushed by a mutodon. He stays perfectly still, even holding in his pee, until the predators leave. Morning. Zora's team finds a valley full of titanosaurs. 2 are mating. Henry cries from joy or awkwardness, unclear. Zora takes the sample, then turn their eyes on Quetzalcoatlus. Back with the family, Reuben's limping like an old man who just discovered arthritis, and their new pet Aqualops refuses to stop tailing them. Isabella decides to name it Dolores, and immediately crams it into her bag like a bootleg Pokemon she plans to smuggle home. They keep walking without noticing the massive hill behind the tree, and, surprise, they all roll down it for what feels like 3 business days before face-planting near a river. Reuben smells something funky, and Dolores suddenly bolts like she just remembered she left the oven on. Across the river sits an abandoned shed, and Teresa spots a boat. Being the designated person who makes bad decisions, she volunteers to fetch it. She swims over, only to find a half-eaten dinosaur carcass. Before she can process that, a Dilophosaurus jumps out, screams in her face, then runs away, because it's apparently terrified of the actual nightmare parked in the bushes, a sleeping T-Rex. Teresa tiptoes into the shed, accidentally spooking a bunch of bats like she's in a budget Batman reboot. The boat's a bust, but she does find a bag with an emergency raft. Meanwhile, Dolores reappears on the opposite shore, and Isabella tries to shoo it away with snacks. Teresa, ignoring the family's frantic whispers, yanks the raft's lever, setting it off with the kind of pop that could wake the dead. Naturally, it wakes the T-Rex. At first, the Rex looks the other way, so Teresa paddles back and everyone piles on the raft. Except Dolores, who gets abandoned like yesterday's leftovers. Then the Rex locks eyes, charges, and dives underwater to gain speed like a scaly torpedo. It pops up in front of them, flips the raft like a cheap pancake, and everyone spills into the current. Reuben, carried by the river, dodges the Rex's lunges purely by accident. He makes it to some rocks with Teresa and Xavier, but Isabella is MIA. They hear her scream. She's hiding under the raft, which the Rex is now gnawing on. The plastic holds, so it picks the raft up and shakes it like it's trying to get the last chip out of the bag. Isabella slips free and runs, the Rex thundering after her, until she joins the others behind rocks that are too tight for Rex access. It gives up and strolls away just as the current delivers the raft back to them. Hours later, Zora's team finally reaches a cliff to collect a sample from a flying death machine called the Quetzalcoatlus. Direct contact is suicide, so they're stealing an egg instead. Clerk rappels down like a pro, Henry freezes like a coward, and Zora mocks him all the way. Duncan spots a tiny dinosaur running into an ancient temple, but doesn't have time to investigate because Henry's rope slips. Duncan catches him just in time. They reach a cave that's actually part of the temple and find a big nest. Henry starts sampling without hurting the baby, explaining to Zora that he wants the cure to be free for everyone. Then Mom comes home. Clerk warns them too late, and the dinosaur corners Henry. Zora distracts it, Clerk throws a tool, and chaos breaks out. The beast pulls Henry's rope by accident, sending him dangling over the cliff, Zora bracing herself to keep him from falling. The vial slips, lands lower, and Henry, ignoring rope snap warnings, swings like Spider-Man until he grabs it. Up top, Duncan and Martin are still hauling ropes when Mom returns, this time holding Clerk in her mouth. She swallows him whole, then chases them, forcing Martin and Duncan to hide in the temple with the samples. The rope finally snaps, sending Henry into the river. He climbs out just as Martin and Duncan sneak out a secret temple exit, Zora rappelling down like nothing happened. The vial parachutes safely into Henry's hands. Mission complete. By evening, the family finds the Enon buildings and calls for help. Zora's team arrives, but Teresa immediately rats out Martin. He whips out a gun, calls her a liar, and cuffs the sample case to his wrist. Suddenly, weird noises, a generator clicking on, lights flaring, and because this island is a nightmare, 2 mutodons burst out. The group scatters. The family hides in a gas station, Ruben and Xavier barricading the door, but Isabella sneaks back for Dolores. Bad timing. The ceiling explodes as a mutodon drops in. She hides in a fridge while her family distracts it, then slips out to rejoin them. Ruben finds a hatch, and they escape into tunnels. Meanwhile, the second mutodon hunts Henry and Duncan into a lab full of crossbreeding horrors. They discover a map of tunnels to the docks. And outside, Zora hides under a jeep with Martin, but he wastes bullets missing the mutodon, so it grabs him, tosses him, and he loses his gun. Zora picks it up. At the meantime, a helicopter appears, so Martin steals a jeep and bails. The mutodon dives into the tunnels after the family after hearing noise, so Zora follows. Henry and Duncan flare for the chopper's attention, but then boss fight. A mutated D-Rex bursts out, chomps the helicopter, and tosses it like trash. Zora appears just in time to gun down the mutodon chasing the family, and they sprint for the docks. But the problem, the gate's locked. Isabella squeezes through to the control panel, Dolores warning her about the incoming D-Rex. Martin arrives in the jeep, distracting it long enough for the gate to open. Zora traps the other mutodon, but the D-Rex grabs Martin and eats him alive, severed hands still cuffed to the samples. Zora snatches it and everyone runs for the boat, only to find the crane jammed. The D-Rex charges Isabella, but Henry remembers it's a moth with anger issues. It likes light. So Duncan lights a flare and swims off to bait it. Zora cuts the crane chain, the boat drops, and they all pile in. Ruben finally gets the engine going just as Drex makes its leap, and they speed away. A moment later, they spot Duncan's flare and find out the dude survived. They rescue him, and by morning Ruben notices Isabella still has Dolores. Zora and Henry agree to make the cure open source, because after all this, yeah, they've earned the moral high ground. By the way, hit that like and subscribe button down below, and we'll meet again in next video.